Tom Hanks has made his career playing real-life people, typically noble men, in positions of extreme stress.
All things considered, I know that I'm one of the luckiest men in the world. To be here on Earth again, to have enjoyed a career in the nation's great space program, and then to be played on the big screen by Tom Hanks. Zowie!
But what few people realise is that Tom Hanks has had a close relationship with the US government throughout his career.
But how did Tom come so far so quickly? Well, nepotism. It just so happens that his great-great-great-great-great-great-grand-uncle, Luke Hanks, was none other than the great-great-grandfather of Abraham Lincoln. And I'm not kidding. Take a look. You can really see the similarities. Except, of course, for the honesty.
Among the real-life people Hanks has played are lawyer Jeffrey Bowers in Philadelphia, astronaut Jim Lovell in Apollo 13, ship captain Richard Phillips in Captain Phillips, pilot Chelsea Sullenberger in Sully, TV presenter Mr. Rogers in A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, and FBI informant Walt Disney in Saving Mr. Banks.
Even in some fictional movies that take place with a true procedure or actual history behind it, that's where I automatically go to, is let's find out what actually happened.
I think if you asked a lot of people, who would you like to play you in your life, who would you like to play? And I think that a lot of people would say Tom Hanks.
I think Tom was at the top of everyone's
Yeah.
list. And we didn't know at first if he was going to be available. But he talked to his wife, Rita Wilson, about it, and she said, you need to do this story.
So when he came round to your house, what did he want to know?
It wasn't so much what he wanted to know, but what he wanted to tell me.
The first thing I said to Richard Phillips when I met him was, I'm going to say things you never said, I'm going to do things you never did.
Perhaps more than any other actor and producer in Hollywood, Hanks has worked with government agencies on many of his biggest and most important films. In 1987, he starred in the reboot of Dragnet, based on the TV and film franchise from the mid-20th century. Just like the originals, the 1987 version was supported by the real-life LAPD, and the department's Hollywood liaison, Dan Cook, worked on the film. In 1994, he got the title role in Forrest Gump, and the producers asked the Pentagon for military support. The DoD ultimately rejected the project, as they felt the script contained too much swearing and sexual content, depicted the military in a stereotyped way, and they didn't like the scene where Forrest moons the president. They also objected to the script portraying the army conducting an experiment to put together a group of dumbos and half-wits who wouldn't question orders. Even though the Pentagon refused to provide any help, the filmmakers changed this aspect of the story. In reality, there was such a program, known as McNamara's 100,000, where men of substandard intelligence were conscripted and sent to fight in Vietnam. Subsequent investigations found that these men were more likely to be killed or injured, and in the years after the war were more likely to be unemployed, poor, and divorced. While early scripts for Forrest Gump reflected some of these realities, in the final version, he becomes rich, gets married, and lives a happy life.
Gump, how can you watch that stupid shit? Turn it off.
You are tuned to the American Forces Vietnam Network. This is Channel 6, Saigon.
The following year, Hanks appeared in Apollo 13, which had support from both the military and NASA. Despite providing the bulk of the support, NASA did not insist on having input on the script. While the US Navy only provided assistance for the brief ocean rescue scene at the end, they insisted that the writers remove all the swear words from the film. This is why this movie about 3 men nearly dying in outer space contains no swearing, making it less true to life, but more family-friendly, and a more positive depiction of America's finest.
Hey, we've got a problem here.
What did you do?
Nothing, I stirred the tanks.
In 1998, Hanks starred in Saving Private Ryan, which was supported by the US Army. Though the plot is totally unrealistic, showing a small band of men setting out to rescue one soldier during an invasion that killed tens of thousands of people, this was another very positive image for the US military. In 2002, he starred opposite Leonardo DiCaprio in Catch Me If You Can, playing FBI agent Carl Hanratty. The character was a composite of several real FBI agents, and the FBI themselves supported the film. In 2004, Hanks played the lead in The Terminal, a film that was supported and rewritten by US Customs and Border Protection, a division of the Department of Homeland Security. In 2010, he was a producer and narrator on The Pacific, a TV series about Marines battling in the Pacific in World War II, which was supported by the Marine Corps. In 2013, he played Captain Phillips in Captain Phillips, supported by the US Navy. In 2016, he played Sully in Sully, supported by the US Air Force.
Hard not to call the movie Brace for Impact, but then you think terrorists are involved or something like that, so we didn't do it.
But Sully is the right name for it.
Oh,
and you
yeah,
really,
he's the man.
You embody everything about this man. Why now? This happened in January of 2009. Yeah. Why do you think the timing is now for the movie to come out, Tom?
Well, I think, for larger philosophical reasons, I think it takes a look at the social contract we have with our institutions. You know, there is a thing that is supposed to happen when you go to the airport and you have a ticket and you get on a plane and you fly from LaGuardia to Charleston, South Carolina. The worst thing that is supposed to happen is they lose your suitcase or you spill coffee on your lap. You're supposed to be able to have faith in a guy and a crew, men and women who come on and say, sit back and we'll get you there without any problems. A problem came up, but they still got there in one form or another. And I think that's always a good American lesson somehow, that you can have faith in our institutions.
And in 2020, he starred in Greyhound, a fictionalized account of the Battle for the Atlantic in World War II, again supported by the US Navy.
It really looks like you guys were on a ship on the water. How much of this movie were you on an actual boat, Tom Hanks?
We shot on board for about 2 weeks on the USS Kidd, that is in the treacherous waters of the Mississippi River, right next to one of the better showboat casinos in Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
In only his second film, The Man with One Red Shoe, Hanks first came into contact with the CIA. A producer at 20th Century Fox, Robert Court, was a former CIA officer, and he recruited 2 others to act as consultants on the movie. Years later, on Charlie Wilson's War, Hanks would get involved with the CIA for real. The film tells the story of how Congressman Charlie Wilson teamed up with the CIA to arrange for billions of dollars of support to the Afghan Mujahideen during the Soviet-Afghan War. A former CIA officer, Milt Bearden, as well as the CIA's Hollywood liaison, Chase Brandon, worked on the script. Early drafts included scenes depicting the CIA directly training the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, and mention Al-Qaeda, as well as a particularly vicious Mujahideen leader and associate of Osama bin Laden, Gulbuddin Hekmatyar, whose faction received the largest proportion of CIA support. The early scripts also showed Wilson drunkenly crashing his car one night and then fleeing the scene, and had the film end on the morning of 9/11, when Wilson is at home and feels the room shake when a plane hits the Pentagon. None of this made it into the finished film.
Tom Hanks absolutely says that this is going to be his next starring role, and he's going to play Charlie Wilson. So, and the interesting thing about him, he on the face of it, he doesn't quite work, except for one thing, which is, well, two things. One is just such a brilliant actor that anything he thinks he can do, he can. But the other is that what characterized Charlie at every single point, no matter what he was doing, no matter how egregious his activities were, somehow people always liked him. Somehow they always felt there was something redeeming, something maybe even underneath it all that was just great, that was going to come out at some point. And he never lost that, no matter where he was. And I really think that's what Hanks personifies. He personifies something that we all like about us, about the best in America.
The original book, and the CIA's own documents, make it clear that Wilson was recruited by the CIA to be their asset in Congress, not just winning money for covert operations, but also protecting the agency from stricter oversight. But the movie plays off Wilson's connection with the CIA as a buddy cop story, featuring lots of jokes and drinking, but nothing of the deeper relationship.
When did you realize his connections, how wired he was in the region?
I knew that he was wildly influential as a funder of the war, and I knew that he had very good relations with the CIA and they liked him. But the idea that he had actually managed to insinuate himself, the first outsider ever to do this, into the clandestine services, into the actual inner sanctum of the CIA, which runs these clandestine operations, I just never thought that was possible or that it had happened.
A few years later, Hanks again took the lead role in Bridge of Spies, which was produced with the US Air Force. It tells the story of lawyer James Donovan, who defended accused Soviet spy Rudolph Abel, and then negotiated a spy swap after the Soviets captured U-2 pilot Gary Powers. In the film, and in interviews, director Steven Spielberg reiterated how the Soviet Union never acknowledged Abel as a spy.
And he had been embedded in this country by the Soviet Union, who, by the way, never acknowledged he was a spy. The Soviet Union never did. Even today, they don't.
Apparently, you're not an American citizen.
That's true.
And according to your boss, you're not a Soviet citizen either.
Well, the boss isn't always right, but he's always the boss.
And Abel? And Abel lived a while longer. He died about 10 years after. I think he died in 1970, something like that. Nothing's known about him. The Russians never acknowledged he was a spy.
Right.
But in Bridge of Spies, Spielberg constantly refers to Powers as a pilot, when in reality he was just as much of a spy as Abel was.
We little men, we just do our jobs.
Like Lieutenant Powers. He's just a pilot.
He was making photographs from 70,000 feet when he was shot from the sky.
Likewise, the film overlooks how Donovan had worked for the OSS, the predecessor to the CIA, and that he received the Distinguished Intelligence Medal, which is usually reserved for CIA officers. As a result, the movie tells us that it is the other side, the Russians, who spy and cheat and manipulate, while our spies and intelligence assets are merely lawyers and pilots.
I think Tom's performance is just wonderful, and I don't know many people who can do that kind of thing of a heroic quality in a very normal, good man, found in a place in society where you would least expect to find it amongst insurance lawyers.
The U-2 plane itself, you told me, where did you shoot that now? And give a little idea what the planes are like.
Right, we shot that at Beale Air Force Base. The U-2 program is still an active program. And I don't know how many U-2s there are at the base that was classified, but they allowed us to use a vintage U-2, but it had been painted black. And we didn't have the budget to paint it silver the way it was in real life.
2 years later, Spielberg and Hanks reunited to make The Post, the story of the Washington Post publishing the Pentagon Papers. Spielberg, Hanks, and Meryl Streep openly admit that the aim of the film was to defend the US news media against a wave of criticism and to make journalists look good.
We have a story that happened to take place, in 1971 that was frighteningly like the story that we've been enveloped with over the last 18 months. The fact that, it's more than mudslinging. They're throwing rocks at the media. Often the rocks are being hurled at the largest collection of truth when the truth doesn't appease the rock hurlers.
What is day in and day out now an assault on the truth. And there is only one truth.
Drawing the parallels between then and now, I think what's most pernicious about this particular moment is not that the person in power disagrees with a story that's being written or is trying to suppress a story. This is about trying to actually take the credibility away from the institution that delivers the stories.
In The Post, Hanks plays the editor of The Post, Ben Bradlee. From the beginning of his career, Bradlee worked for US intelligence, initially for the CIA-connected US Information Agency. Documents in the CIA's archive record how he was kicked out of France due to his work for the government, as well as Bradlee's move to Newsweek's Washington, D.C. bureau, and include numerous letters between Bradlee and several CIA directors throughout his time as editor of The Post. They even discussed recruiting him as a consultant so they could better understand how secret information was being leaked to the press.
Tom and I both knew Ben. Ben Bradlee was my neighbor for many, many years. He lived right across the street. He and Sally Quinn lived right across the street from me on Long Island. And we saw each other every summer. So I knew Ben, and Tom knew Ben as well. And I thought that Tom brought the essence of Ben to life in his portrayal of Ben Bradlee.
He was like a model of a newsman, like a lot of...
Oh, he lived and died for it. Ben Bradlee was fabulous. He said, there's this great, I watched all sorts of... Actually, I met the man. I had dinner and drinks with him, and he was just like that. He spoke his accent. He said, you got to make sure, if you're going to put it on the front page of the paper, you've got to make sure it's right. Because if you're wrong, you got to eat it for the next 24 hours. And it doesn't taste good.
In 1982, Washington Post reporter Bob Woodward had a story about the CIA training the Contras, an ultra-right-wing terrorist gang in Nicaragua who were fighting the Sandinista government. But the story was never published because Bradlee killed it, telling Woodward that it wasn't news unless the CIA were doing this without telling the president. While The Post acknowledges Bradlee's close relationship with the Kennedys, it ignores his much more important role as a CIA asset. Instead, Bradlee is heroized as an uncompromising truth-teller who resists the government's attempts to censor the media.
When our the state goes after the press, it's a very dangerous situation in a democracy because it gives license all around the world for this to happen.
I think out of that came a new kind of work ethic from him that just said, look, it's a matter of there is an incontrovertible truth out there. And as long as you can confirm it, you must print it, letting whatever personal chips fall as they may.
Alongside helping to polish the public images of the Pentagon, CIA, and FBI, Tom Hanks also fronted The Terminal. Based on real-life stories, The Terminal is the classic example of a Hanks-Spielberg film. On the surface, it is a schmaltzy comedy about a man who is stuck in an airport and all the amusing adventures and hijinks he gets up to. But underneath that, it's an image of American society. Hanks, as an outsider, learns about America by living at the airport, and as he learns, so do we, the audience. The giant airport set for the film was built at the US Air Force's Plant 42 complex, near the Lockheed Martin Skunk Works. In the story, the airport functions as a microcosm for American society, featuring working for less than minimum wage, criminal illegal immigrants,
I take a knife and I stab him in his chest.
product placement, sexually aggressive women who hate men,
I just wish the sex wasn't so amazing.
Okay.
It's pretty amazing.
All right, bye-bye.
warrantless search and seizure, the capitalist class system, food stamps, immigrant sex pervert stalkers, product placement, assaulting black juveniles, government bureaucrats complaining about their salaries,
$19 an hour.
Unbelievable. Do you know that's more than I make?
Harvey Weinstein, eating junk food due to poverty, constant surveillance, and product placement.
Where do I buy the Nike shoes?
Ultimately, The Terminal is a piece of pro-corporate, pro-government propaganda. The filmmakers approached US Customs and Border Protection for help on the movie, but the CBP insisted on major rewrites. Ann Sitman, head of their television and motion pictures division, explained that they cooperated because it was an opportunity to influence what people see and how they react to it. In the script they reviewed, the port director was written as evil and on the take. So they had Spielberg redesign the story to soften the character and make the CBP look heroic.
So the potato chips are Krakosia.
Okay.
And this apple,
Big apple. Big apple.
the big apple, represents the Liberty Rebels. Okay?
A draft script shows just how much the film changed from its original incarnation. The film was originally a psychological thriller about US immigration policy, where Victor and other immigrants and foreigners are frequently shown being bullied and harassed by government officials. The opening line of the film sees the port director tell his subordinate, "When the toilets of the third world flush, all the shit comes pouring through those doors." When Victor is first detained, he passes a Chinese man who is shaking with fear while pledging allegiance to the US, an Arab couple whose luggage is being torn apart by dogs, and a Vietnamese refugee whose baby is forcibly taken from her by an immigration officer. Victor is locked in a cell for hours before anyone explains to him what is going on.
Staying at the Ramada Inn?
Keep the change.
The script frequently refers to Victor being afraid, panicked, even terrified, as he witnesses the brutal impact of the US government on petty criminals and illegal immigrants, and experiences it himself. But once Spielberg came on board, and the CBP insisted the filmmakers rewrite the script, The Terminal evolved into a light-hearted comedy, where the struggle between Victor and the government officials is played off as a joke, a fun game where everything is all right in the end. Instead of exploring the experiences of a man caught up in the Kafkaesque machinations of state bureaucracy, it was diluted into a xenophobic feel-good comedy and an extended advert for all the shit you can buy in airports.
Well, what I do? There's only one thing you can do here, Mr. Navorsky. Shop.
So, who is Tom Hanks? One of the most beloved actors in Hollywood? A frontman for propaganda? Or both simultaneously?
Thomas J. Hanks. Throughout a distinguished film career, Tom Hanks has revealed the character of America as well as his own, portraying war heroes, an astronaut, a ship captain, a cartoon cowboy, a young man growing up too fast, and dozens of others. He's allowed us to see ourselves, not only as we are, but as we aspire to be. On screen and off, Tom Hanks has honored the sacrifices of those who have served our nation, called on us all to think big and to believe, and inspired a new generation of young people to reach for the sky.
His disarming performances act as a cover for the authoritarian and often nationalistic subtexts in many of his films, putting a friendly face on state-sponsored entertainment.
Why do you think you always get picked to play this kind of role?
I think I'm an ordinary-looking guy. I'm just this dude with a big ass and a squeaky voice and my father's nose.
You know, a lot of people trust you, and it's true.
Hanks functions as a non-threatening John Wayne, reflecting a comforting image of America back at itself and projecting that image across the world.
And look, it's not necessarily anything that has come out, that is stated, but it ends up being imprinted somehow in key moments of the behavior throughout. And that is a wonderful thing to be able to have in your pocket.
In total, Hanks' films have glorified war, covered up for the Pentagon's mistreatment of its own people, encouraged military recruitment, trivialized US immigration policies, protected the news media, and whitewashed the CIA's influence on America and the world. However, he has no intention of going into politics, preferring the more influential role as a Trojan horse for government propaganda.
I've asked you whether you wanted to be a candidate in the past, and you said, no, I would never run because I'm an actor. What I do is I empathize with other people and I tell their stories. I'm not a politician.
You should run for president.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Ever thought about it? Ever considered it?
Are you out of your mind? I will find my own way to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States without getting paid for it.